Cyber Insiders, untold stories from behind the cyber frontline.
Hi, and welcome to Cyber Insiders, the podcast where we look at what it's really like to be on the front line of cybersecurity. I'm Dominique Adams, your podcast host and communications lead at Adarma, one of the UK's leading managed security service providers. Now, today I'm going to be talking to Cian Heasley, who is a threat lead at Adarma, about two new Ivanti vulnerabilities that are being actively exploited in the wild. We're also going to be discussing the group behind it, UNC 5221. Now, Cian's going to be providing us with a breakdown about what's been going on behind the scenes and what this means for cyber defenders. So without further ado, hi Cian, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
So can you do just a little explainer up front for anyone who's not familiar with what's going on?
Of course. So UNC 5221 are a threat actor group. Mandiant, if they haven't classified a group as belonging to a larger APT group, call these smaller clusters of activity UNC. UNC stands for unclassified, so in this case it's UNC 5221. UNC 5221 is believed to be People's Republic of China government-linked APT group, and what they do is they engage in mass exploitation of zero-day or already known vulnerabilities. The basic goal of this group is espionage, so data exfiltration.
What makes these attack methods so effective and difficult to detect?
So there's a couple of different aspects here that are in the favor of UNC 5221 in these campaigns. So some of these vulnerabilities are entirely unknown, so presumably these are discovered by UNC 5221 themselves, in which case nobody's aware of them. If people aren't monitoring the devices that these vulnerabilities are present on, then UNC 5221 will be able to get in there, will be able to do what they need to do, and nobody will be any the wiser. And in the cases of known vulnerabilities, they're able to mobilize mass exploitation campaigns. So they're able to automate exploitation, first of all, finding the vulnerable devices and then exploiting them very, very quickly. And that, I would assume, is because they have a lot of people behind the team who are able to spin up scanning devices or scanning infrastructure, and also able to actually automate the exploitation of the vulnerability as well. So those are the primary things that they have going for them. I'd say lastly, some of the devices that they're exploiting, maybe people aren't monitoring the logs properly, aren't looking at access, maybe have forgotten that those devices are on their network or aren't paying attention to them.
So with these particular activities, how quickly did the exploitation begin after the vulnerabilities were disclosed?
Within the week, within days generally. UNC 5221 will try to, if it's a vulnerability that they themselves didn't discover, they will try, I think, to start mass exploitation before a patch can be released. So we're talking days here.
This campaign that's been attributed to UNC 5221, some threat analysts have linked this APT group to Gothic Panda. I mean, what do we know about this group, and how valid are these, these alleged claims?
Gothic Panda is another People's Republic of China linked APT. Originally, they were believed to target the US, so systems within the US. It's believed that recently they've moved to targeting Hong Kong, so political activists, journalists, groups within Hong Kong. While some people have drawn links between the two, their goals and their targets don't necessarily align completely, but it's completely possible that within whatever ministry or whatever group within the People's Republic of China, if indeed these groups are linked to that government, that there are different groups, subgroupings, maybe engaging in different activities or with different goals.
So this current campaign, how does it compare with their early activities such as the Connect Secure and the SAPT NetWeaver exploits?
This most recent campaign was against what's called the Ivanti EPMM, which is basically an Ivanti service, an appliance, or it can be a virtual machine that does mobile device management. You basically enroll your mobile devices in your business or your organization into this service, and then it makes sure that those are kept secure and kept updated and enrolled into security controls and everything else. So in this case, there was a 0 day, or actually 2 0 days within this appliance that enabled somebody first to bypass authentication and then to access an API endpoint that would allow them to run code on the appliance or in the virtual machine. So essentially, once you could dodge the need to be authenticated, you could run any code that you wanted or any commands that you wanted on the appliance. And in general, that appliance would be running CentOS, so Linux. So any commands you could run if you were sitting at the terminal for Linux, you could run via this exploit.
Why do perimeter devices like Ivanti EPMM continue to be the focus for Chinese espionage groups?
So it isn't just Chinese espionage groups, but these devices are really high value. So if you think about having a Linux machine, hackers love Linux, hackers love to be able to compile software on Linux. This is running CentOS, which is a normal, everyday brand of Linux, or I guess I should say this distribution of Linux. It isn't obscure, it isn't bespoke. So they can predict then what tools they'll be able to put onto that machine. And then essentially, if they can gain access to that machine, they gain access to the information that machine does. But also then they have a sort of a beachhead on the network where they can dwell, they can reach out to other machines on the network, they can do reconnaissance. It's essentially like a ready-built area for them to then pursue whatever they need to do after that.
So you and the incident response team at Adarma, what specific tools and techniques have you seen UNC 5221 used in this specific campaign?
In this specific campaign, we saw some command line obfuscation. So this was using base64 encoding to run commands that then would not be as easily visible if you were monitoring the appliance. We saw various ways of dragging tools down. Krusty Loader is the malware that they used from Amazon AWS hosting. So once again, that probably wouldn't trigger any alarms because it isn't an odd unknown IP address or hosting provider. It's AWS, which everybody would expect to see in their network logs. And we saw a lot of discovery commands. So working out who the user was that they were able to run commands as, what the host name of the machine was, and essentially other aspects of information about the machine and where it sat on the network. And then the Krusty Loader malware was supposed to run, and there was supposed to be a Sliver C2. So Sliver is a command and control framework that's used by pen testers, but also by criminals or APT groups to control breached endpoints.
So these attackers, they seem to have deep technical knowledge of the Ivanti systems. What does that suggest about their capabilities or intent?
I think you alluded earlier to previous campaigns. In March 2025, there was a Connect Secure, so that's Ivanti's VPN appliance. There was a 0-day in that. In April 2024, MITRE, the people who make MITRE Attack, and obviously a bunch of other useful cybersecurity frameworks and tools, they believe that they were hacked by UNC 5221 using an Ivanti 0-day. And then in February 2024, there was another Connect Secure 0-day. So it's obvious that they are very interested in Ivanti products, that they have maybe access to Ivanti products or Ivanti source code, and that they are probing the appliances, the source code, all of the infrastructure to see if there are more 0-days. And I guess this points to the usage of Ivanti products by the types of organizations that they want to target. So in particular, they seem very interested in critical national infrastructure. They're also interested in finance and government, but I guess that these are devices that must be used by companies, organizations, or government agencies that they're interested in breaching.
Post-compromise, what kind of reconnaissance and credential harvesting have been observed?
We observed the access of a MySQL database that was used to store credentials on the appliance, and also the theft of certificates that were used on the appliance.
You kind of touched on CNI and financial organizations are most at risk from campaigns like this, but can you dive a little bit more into why, and maybe are there other sectors that should also be on alert for this?
So financial, I guess that in that case, it's obvious they want access to the data, or there's potential usage in having access to financial organizations if you wanted to trigger some sort of an attack or something else. CNI is a bit of a thornier one, and I can only speculate there that this is pre-positioning. So they gain access to CNI, energy, water utilities, transportation, and then they're able to then use that to basically pre-position potentially for attacks again. So if there was some sort of a real-world conflict, they could then trigger some sort of a shutdown of these systems, or maybe as a warning. We've definitely seen the Russians do this with Ukraine, so shutting down energy companies or heating installations for buildings there. So I would assume it would be a similar sort of situation, or potentially just to have as a bargaining chip to say, we have access, or we know that we have access to these systems. So it's a little bit more sinister on that end. The financial side, you could look at maybe even theft there. But when you get into CNI, obviously it is the implications are a bit more dangerous.
So for organizations, what can they do right now to protect themselves?
You have to monitor these edge devices. If something's on the edge of your network and it's internet accessible, you have to be monitoring that. Even if you think it's behind authentication, in the case obviously of these two vulnerabilities that were chained, the first one enabled them to dodge that authentication. So it's not enough just to assume that the appliance or the server is protected because these protections are built in. You have to assume that it's possible that those detections or that those authentication or other security controls can be bypassed. You have to be monitoring traffic to these devices and then also monitor the administrative or shell logs. So in this case, you would want to be able to see that commands are being run via the user that was assigned to the server side of this. So suspicious discovery commands or suspicious credential harvesting commands are being run on the server.
So to me, who's obviously a layman, that sounds like you need a lot of technical expertise. So what would your dream team look like if you want to defend against something like this and to have the capability to execute what you've just said? So for companies that are maybe at greenfield level, what do they need?
Well, so I'm a threat intel person, so I'm immediately going to, of course, say threat intel. So you need somebody doing some threat intelligence work to pinpoint what kind of groups might want to gain access to your devices. You can look at the techniques that they would use. So in the case of UNC 5221, you would know that they would be looking at these Ivanti products in particular. And if you had those on your network, you would know we need to really pay attention to those products in particular. I would say threat hunting as well. So somebody who's looking for suspicious activity on your network, someone who's looking for that tailored to the groups that might target you. So looking for the types of techniques that would be used by groups, for instance, targeting CNI. And then vulnerability management is the other obvious one. So you want to be aware immediately if there is a 0 day. As soon as it's reported, you want to be able to start looking at patching or taking those systems offline until you can patch them. And then finally, incident response. So that's what we're talking about here is Adarma's incident response capability. You want somebody who's able to go in there if the worst comes to the worst and you are breached, to go in there and investigate and make sure that you understand exactly the extent of the breach, you understand what was done, what was taken, and also, very importantly, if they're able to move to other systems or if they're still able to access systems on your network, which is, of course, extremely important.
Looking to the future, groups like UNC 5221, I know this is all prediction and speculation, but how do you think their activity is going to escalate?
So I would say we'll see more of the same. I think it's also interesting to draw parallels here with ransomware groups. So CLOP is the obvious example here. CLOP has been looking for vulnerabilities in file sharing technology used by corporations. It's a similar sort of a race there where they are looking at either appliances or servers where somebody can upload files from a remote system to the corporate network or from the corporate network share them out to remote systems. It's a similar thing here that we're seeing with UNC 5221. They're looking at VPN appliances or mobile device managers, or all of these different systems that are accessible from the internet. And I think it just points to the fact that we have to be really careful with these. We have to audit access to them. And also we have to make sure that we're monitoring the systems because there are vulnerabilities out there that we just don't know about. And there are, whether it's ransomware groups or APT groups, they're actively looking for these vulnerabilities. They're trying to uncover them, and then they're going to try and exploit them as quickly as possible to get in there before any patching can take place. So I would say that's basically what we're looking at here, is a future where these edge devices on the edge of your network, are going to be sort of almost like a war field in a way, where you're going to be constantly trying to repel attackers, make sure that you're seeing if anybody's probing your defenses, and making sure that nobody can gain a foothold on there to attack further into your network.
So you've talked about the critical threat to CNI and how that can be exploited in a political situation. Given the global political situation seems to be escalating significantly, how is that transforming the cybersecurity landscape?
So for CNI specifically, ever since the outbreak of the Russian war on Ukraine, we've seen Russian hacktivist groups targeting CNI in America, trying to target CNI in Europe as well. After the conflict between Israel and that regional conflict, essentially, we've seen Iran-backed hackers hacking Israeli CNI. So even taking aside ransomware groups, we saw obviously DarkSide with Colonial Pipeline years ago. Hacktivists themselves are also targeting CNI. Ransomware groups are targeting CNI because they know that there can be very little downtime. So if you're running an energy company, if you're running an airliner, there can be very little downtime. You are critical national infrastructure. You need to get back up and running as quickly as possible. And that makes extortion that much more attractive for them because they know that you're going to need to be able to get your systems back up and running. And then finally, we have APT groups. So APT groups are also interested, for the reasons that I outlined there, to pre-position themselves, to have bargaining chips, to be able to threaten attacks. So it really is a very difficult security situation for CNI companies right now.
So to conclude, because I mean, this has been very interesting. I feel like I know a lot more about these Ivanti vulnerabilities. Is there any final thoughts you would like to give our listeners? Like, is there a final message that you really want to get across?
So it's something that I always come back to: know your assets, know what's on your network, understand whether you're keeping things patched, understand whether you're monitoring these appliances or these servers, and just be vigilant. That's all I can really say here at the end.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much.
To our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this and found it informative. If you have any concerns that were raised in today's podcast, then please reach out to us at hello@adarma.com. And if you'd like to learn more about incident response or vulnerability management or threat intelligence and how Adarma helps organizations strengthen their cybersecurity posture, then you can also visit us at our website, www.adarma.com. So until next time, take care of yourself.
Cyber Insiders from Adarma. Follow and rate on your podcast app. Together, we've got this.